I never believed in curses, never thought the stories you hear online were anything more than fiction. But after what happened that night, everything changed. What started as a simple thrill-seeking adventure exploring an abandoned asylum turned into a nightmare I can't shake, no matter how hard I try. It all began with a text from a friend, daring me to check out this old, forgotten place on the edge of town. They said it was empty, haunted only by ghosts of the past. I thought it'd be a fun story to tell, maybe a few chills and some cool footage. But I had no idea the price I'd pay for stepping inside. The asylum wasn't just abandoned, it felt swallowed by time, like it was holding its breath, waiting. The heavy iron gates creaked as I pushed them open, the air thick with rust and something else I couldn't quite place, a whisper, almost, carried on the wind. My heart was pounding, but curiosity pushed me forward. I remember standing at the edge of that cracked concrete path, staring up at the massive, decaying building. The windows were broken, like empty eyes staring back at me. The walls, stained and crumbling, held stories better left forgotten. It was silent, too silent. No wind, no birds, just a suffocating stillness that pressed down on me like a weight. As I stepped closer, a shiver ran down my spine. The stories I'd read online, those creepy Reddit threads where people claimed they'd been cursed after messing with places like this, none of that seemed real before. But standing there, with the dark entrance looming ahead, I started to wonder if some of those tales were warnings. I could feel the asylum watching me. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything shifted. The air inside was cold, colder than any night should be. It smelled like old medicine and something rotten beneath it. My footsteps echoed in the empty halls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow was alive. That's when the first strange thing happened. A soft noise, a whisper. A breath, right behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. My skin prickled like I'd touched a live wire. The kind of chill that crawls under your skin and settles in your bones. And then, the whisper grew louder. Not words, just a sound, a low, haunting hum that seemed to pulse through the walls. I froze. Whatever was in there with me wasn't just some ghost story. It was something else. Something real. Something dangerous. I wanted to turn back, to run out into the night and forget I ever came here. But the asylum had already grabbed hold of me. And I just knew, that the curse had started the moment I stepped inside. The moment I stepped past those iron gates, the world outside felt miles away. The streetlights flickered behind me, but the asylum stood like a dark monolith, untouched by time or light. It was like crossing into a forgotten realm where every sound was amplified and every shadow held secrets. The air was thick with dampness, smelling of mold and rust, mixed with a faint metallic tang that reminded me of old blood. My boots crunched on broken glass and dry leaves scattered across the cracked concrete path leading to the front doors. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted my presence. I took out my flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick darkness. The light bounced off peeling paint, cracked walls, and shattered windows. The asylum's facade was a grotesque collage of decay, chunks of bricks missing, graffiti scrawled across the walls, and vines creeping like silent invaders. A sudden gust of wind rattled the broken windows, making a hollow, rattling sound that echoed like distant bones clattering. I swallowed hard, my breath visible in the cold air. The temperature dropped even further inside, and I felt goosebumps rise across my arms. The front doors hung ajar, creaking slowly in the wind. Pushing them open, I was met with a wave of stale air that smelled like forgotten memories and rot. The foyer was vast but claustrophobic, swallowed in darkness except for my flashlight's narrow beam. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, disturbed only by my movement. My footsteps echoed off the high ceilings and faded paint. Broken tiles crunched beneath my feet. The silence was oppressive, broken only by distant creaks and the occasional drip of water somewhere deep within the building. I ran my fingers along the banister of a grand staircase, feeling the rough, chipped wood. The coldness of it seeped through my gloves, sending another shiver down my spine. The place felt alive, but not in any way that was comforting. I moved deeper into the hallway, hearing my breath come in short, sharp gasps. My heartbeat thudded loudly in my ears. The walls were lined with old, faded photographs, some still hanging crooked, others ripped or defaced. Faces stared back at me, patients, doctors, forgotten souls whose eyes seemed to follow me. Every creak and groan of the building sent my nerves on edge. I caught myself listening for footsteps that weren't mine, for whispers that might be carried by the drafts. The asylum felt like it was breathing, slowly, waiting. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered, threatening to die. Panic flared. I tapped it, and it steadied, but the moment reminded me how vulnerable I was here. If the light went out, I'd be swallowed whole by the darkness. I paused in what looked like an old waiting room. Broken chairs were scattered, their cushions torn and stained. Papers and medical files littered the floor, yellowed and brittle. I picked one up, squinting to read the faded ink, patient logs, dates going back decades. Names I didn't recognize, but some scribbled notes mentioned psychotic episodes, delusions, and something chilling, cursed. I swallowed hard and dropped the papers. It was a word that had been haunting me since I got here. A soft scrape echoed from deeper within the building, something metal dragged slowly across the floor. My skin tightened, every hair on my body standing on end. I turned toward the sound, holding my breath, but saw nothing. Then, just as I was about to convince myself it was my imagination, a sudden cold breeze brushed past me, carrying a faint whisper that sounded like a warning, or maybe a plea. I couldn't tell which. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run back through those gates and never look back. But something, some dark force, held me here. Like the asylum was calling me deeper into its heart. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became, thick with dust and memories. Each step echoed down the endless corridors, bouncing off walls scarred by time and neglect. The flashlight flickered occasionally, casting long, jittery shadows that twisted into shapes just beyond sight. Rooms opened up on either side, each telling a story of decay and abandonment. I stepped into what looked like an old patient room. A rusted bed frame stood crooked in the corner, sheets yellowed and torn. On the floor, scattered pills and shattered glass told of desperate attempts or forgotten routines. I found a cabinet filled with cracked jars, some still containing strange, cloudy liquids. The labels were faded, but a few words remained: sedative, experimental. I shuddered, wondering what horrors had been concocted in these walls. As I moved through the halls, I heard faint sounds, the distant drip of water, a soft scuffling, whispers so quiet they felt like echoes of the past. My skin prickled, and I slowed my pace, senses stretched taut. At one point, I entered what must have been the old therapy room. Chairs sat in a circle, faded upholstery torn and stained. On the wall, an ancient chalkboard still held fragments of a session: voices grow louder, fear is real, must stay strong. I paused, the weight of those words settling in my chest. It felt like the asylum itself was trying to speak to me, to warn me. The temperature dropped again, and my breath came out in misty clouds. Then, something shifted. A sudden chill swept through the room, and the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. My heart jumped into my throat as I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand. I raced to the door, trying the handle. It was locked tight. Panic crept in, cold and unforgiving. I pounded on the wood, shouting, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open slowly, as if pushed by unseen hands. I didn't hesitate. I bolted into the hallway, desperate to put distance between me and that room. But the asylum wasn't done with me yet. As I hurried on, the faint whispers grew louder, more insistent. I could almost make out words, names, warnings, pleas. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing in sync with my pounding heart. I stumbled into a long hallway lined with peeling wallpaper, stained with water and age. At the far end, a door stood slightly open, a dim red light flickering from within. Drawn inexplicably toward it, I stepped inside. The room was a morgue, or something like it. Cold slabs lined the walls, some cracked, some stained with dark patches I hoped were only rust. A single flickering bulb overhead cast grotesque shadows. On a table in the center lay a tattered journal, its pages yellowed but intact. I picked it up, hands shaking, and began to read. The entries were written in hurried, scrawling handwriting, notes from a doctor who'd worked here decades ago. They spoke of strange patients, inexplicable illnesses, and growing fear among the staff. But then the tone darkened. References to the curse appeared, warnings not to disturb what lay beneath the asylum's floors. I looked up, suddenly aware of a heavy silence pressing down on me. The red light flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. My flashlight was still on, but the room felt colder than before, like ice crawling under my skin. I could hear breathing, not mine, soft, slow, deliberate. I swallowed my fear and turned toward the door, but the hallway outside had changed. It stretched endlessly, shadows deepening, and the whispers had turned into voices, urgent, desperate, chilling. I realized then that I wasn't just exploring an abandoned building. I was trapped in a place that lived, breathed, and hungered. My breath caught as I stood frozen in the endless hallway, the voices swirling around me like a storm I couldn't escape. The walls seemed to close in, their faded wallpaper peeling like skin, revealing something darker beneath. Suddenly, the air thickened, heavy, suffocating. A cold presence pressed against my chest, stealing my breath and making my limbs numb. I tried to move, but it was like I was trapped in quicksand, every muscle locked tight. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, shimmering and translucent, barely more than a shadow, drifted silently along the hallway. Its eyes glowed faintly, filled with a sorrow that pierced through the darkness. It looked at me, not with anger, but with a desperate warning. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved closer, and with it came a wave of memories I hadn't lived, flashes of pain, fear, and loss. I felt the weight of every life trapped in this place, every soul chained to the asylum's curse. The whispers turned into voices, clearer now, pleading, begging for release. "Help us," they said, "end the curse." My flashlight flickered wildly as the figure reached out a hand, its touch icy cold, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. Panic surged, and I stumbled backward, breaking the invisible grip holding me. I ran. The hallway twisted and shifted as I fled, the asylum's walls seeming to morph, trapping me deeper inside its maze. Doors slammed shut behind me, locking one by one, while the voices grew louder, now angry, vengeful. I could feel eyes watching, unseen but unblinking. The very air hummed with malevolence. Breathing hard, I reached a stairwell and dashed upward, each step echoing in the void. At the top, the hallway was empty, eerily silent except for the pounding of my heart. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, sweat cold on my skin despite the chill. The encounter had changed everything. The asylum was no longer just a building. It was alive, cursed, and it had marked me. Leaving the asylum that night was supposed to mean safety. But the moment I stepped outside, I felt it, the curse had followed me, clinging like a shadow I couldn't shake. At first, it was small things. A whisper in the dark just beyond my bedroom door. Shadows moving at the edge of my vision. Objects misplaced, then found where they shouldn't be. I blamed exhaustion, my overactive imagination after that night in the asylum. But it didn't stop. Sleep became impossible. Every night, I'd wake to the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, right next to my ear, though no one was there. I felt watched, stalked by something unseen. My phone buzzed with messages from numbers I didn't know, empty texts with nothing but static. My dreams turned into nightmares so vivid I woke shaking, drenched in sweat. Faces from the asylum haunted me, those translucent figures begging for help, their eyes hollow and accusing. The curse was changing me. I lost track of days, my mind fraying at the edges. Friends started to notice, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't explain. How do you tell someone you're cursed by a place long abandoned? Worse, the pain started. Sharp, stabbing sensations in my chest. Cold spots on my skin that burned. My reflection in the mirror sometimes flickered, like I was staring at someone else, or something else. One night, I tried to go back to the asylum, hoping to find answers or maybe break the curse. But when I arrived, the gates were gone. The path was overgrown, and where the asylum once stood was only an empty field bathed in moonlight. I was trapped. The curse wasn't just a haunting. It was a prison. The night I decided to leave for good, the curse hit harder than ever. Shadows twisted around me, whispering threats I couldn't ignore. Every step toward the asylum felt like wading through thick fog, pulling me back. Inside, the halls had changed again, darkness thicker, walls closing in. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into total black. Panic clawed at my chest as cold fingers brushed my skin, unseen hands gripping, dragging me back. I ran blindly, heart pounding, lungs burning. The voices were all around me now, screaming in a cacophony of rage and sorrow. I could feel something chase me, closing in with every step. Finally, a door appeared, a way out. I threw myself against it, breaking free into the night air. The cold hit me like a wave, and I didn't stop running until the asylum was a distant nightmare behind me. But I knew the curse wasn't over. It never ends. Even though I escaped the asylum, the curse never really left me. It follows me everywhere, in every shadow, every silence. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the whispers again, soft and desperate, just beyond the edge of hearing. I've tried everything to break free, rituals, prayers, even moving far away, but it's like the asylum's grip has rooted itself inside me. The strange pains, the cold spots, the flickering reflections, they're reminders that some doors, once opened, never truly close. So now, I tell this story. Not just as a warning, but as a way to keep the curse alive, maybe even to share it with someone brave enough to understand. Because the asylum's shadow is long, and its curse doesn't end with me. If you ever find yourself standing before an abandoned place like that, remember, some places are best left alone. Thanks for listening, and if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and like. It helps keep me safe, at least, for now.